Welcome to Yat Meals, the show where I cook and talk about things. On today's menu, we have Tonkotsu ramen with miso sticky short ribs, and today's topic, Flanderization, the eighth deadly sin. To start off today's show, we have the lychee shot. The lychee shot is used to celebrate something that's going on in our lives. For me, it's kind of funny because it's the same celebration, just in a new way. In that last episode, I celebrated 1,000 subscribers, and that was, a really huge milestone for me. And then, bam, like almost overnight, I had the biggest episode to date. And now there are 17,000 of you certified yappers. So, wow. I don't have much else to say other than thank you. It's really been insane, the overwhelming amount of support that I've gotten. I feel like a lot of what I wanted this show to be, and that it's comforting. I told people that I wanted to be the Bob Ross of cooking. A lot of you have said that. And talking about the topic itself, I've had a lot of in-depth conversations with you guys in the comments, and it's been just so overwhelmingly amazing. So thank you so much for subscribing to the channel and for continuing to watch. Another thing, in part, to celebrate is the growth of the Patreon, because today we have 3 different patrons from over there who would like to celebrate something. So for Ree, they got their first job in a field that they're passionate about, in arts administration. I hope I'm saying this correctly, but I believe it's Jamin. They landed a travel job, and they've always wanted to travel, so I hope that you get to see tons of great things as you're on the road and in the air for your job. And lastly, but certainly not least, Livy started therapy. That is a huge thing. That's a huge thing in life. So Livy, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so glad that you have started that process. I consider it to be a lifelong process because we are continuing to get to know ourselves more and more every day. And having a professional who can help us in that process is just so incredibly useful. It's the kind of thing that I can't really speak to unless you've been to therapy. It's the kind of thing that you don't really know until you know. I'm doing my best not to ramble, but to celebrate the growth of the show and all of the submissions from our lovely patrons over on Patreon. Cheers. For today's episode, you will need the following ingredients: pork neck bones, onion, mushroom, garlic, mirin, soy sauce, flanken cut short ribs, brown sugar, miso, ramen noodles, green onions, and toppings. In my case, it will be kimchi and fried garlic. To start off the cooking for today's episode, I will start on the tare, which is basically just a salty umami sauce that goes at the bottom of your bowl of ramen before you spoon in, or ladle in, I suppose, your broth and then your noodles and toppings. It's quite a simple sauce. I'm just going to saute these mushrooms, deglaze it with some mirin, throw in some soy sauce, a little bit of sugar, and MSG, of course, and that will be the sauce. As you can see on camera too, the ramen broth is already going. I guess we can take a quick little look under here of what we're looking like. So the broth has already started to definitely not be clear. That water is quite murky as the collagens and fats and things have started to cook out of the bones. All that I did was threw the pork neck bones in along with my veg. So that was mushroom, garlic, onions, and I believe some ginger, and threw a cartouche on top of that. And that's just gonna go for a few more hours. I've already had it cooking, simmering for quite some time, so those flavors are gonna continue to develop. That broth is gonna continue to get more and more pork flavor in it and get super rich and umami and meaty and tasty. If you've ever had tonkotsu ramen, I'm sure that you're familiar with how awesome the broth can be. I wanted to talk about today's topic, Flanderization, because, well, I was quite excited to do this because it's kind of combining my 2 passions in psychology and, just talking about people and the human condition and, interpersonal relationships and cartoons. So I'm sure that many of you have taken notice of the multiple animations and stop motion and things that I have put on the channel. So Flanderization, if you are not familiar with it, as defined by Max Floorschutz, is the act of the character progressively demonstrating a certain favorable trait continuously to the point that said trait not only becomes exaggerated, but begins to overwhelm all other traits. In extreme cases, it may be the only trait left by the end of a story or series, all other elements of their character now fallen by the wayside or part of this single trait. Real quick, I'm going to transfer our broth over to an adjacent eye so that I can begin cooking our tare sauce. In the pan currently is some leftover oil that I had from cooking for a couple friends last night. Just some basil oil. Should I put basil and flavor in my tare? Probably not. But you know who's going to? And has two thumbs? Yeah, this guy. I'm going to start with a rather high heat, just so I can try to sear these mushrooms. They're going to release a ton of water, so that water is going to cook out into the oil, and then hopefully as that evaporates, we will get some nice color and char on our mushrooms to help develop some more of that umami flavor in our tare sauce. And then once it starts to get real sticky on the pan, I will go in and deglaze with some mirin, and finish off with some soy sauce, perhaps some garlic as well. And then we'll just kind of let that sit on a real low heat over to the side. Perhaps I might even cool it entirely as we let our broth get cooking. The term Flanderization is of course named after the Simpsons character Ned Flanders, where he began the series playing this perfect neighbor role, and his Christianity was more alluded to, but as the series continued, he stopped being Ned Flanders, the prototypical perfect neighbor, and he started to be Ned Flanders, the Bible thumper. The character that embodies Flanderization, to me, that was most prominent in my mind was Patrick Star from SpongeBob. I understand that comedy shows do lean on comedic relief characters to serve punchlines or to be the butt of the joke when writers feel that the audience could use a break from the plot's progression. Hence the term comedic relief. Much of Patrick's most iconic moments in SpongeBob were not simply him being stupid, it was his positioning that he was supposed to be smart that made his stupidity funny. None of us had ever heard the term wumbo, right? But he said it so confidently, he pulled it from his back pocket, like it was some information that only he was privy to and that we were ignorant for not knowing. In the episode Suds, when SpongeBob gets sick, Patrick explains to SpongeBob what a doctor's office is, right? SpongeBob's not familiar with a waiting room, with the cold feeling of a stethoscope on him, right? And the way that Patrick explains it scares SpongeBob, and he doesn't want to go to the doctor now. And so whenever SpongeBob and Patrick both are protesting against Sandy taking him to the doctor, and instead Patrick, let me see exactly what it is that he does. Yes, Patrick plugs all of SpongeBob's pores. He pulls his tooth for some reason. He turns his foot into a peanut butter sandwich. He puts him in a medieval stretching device. All of these things that clearly would not fix the common cold. So it's so funny for us to watch it and be like, SpongeBob, just go to the doctor, man. Like, Patrick has no idea what he's talking about. Another episode that comes to mind is SpongeBob cheating on his driving exam, right? Where it's a terrible idea to cheat in academics, but Patrick's like, oh, just cheat, SpongeBob. Like, no. Wow, it is smelling so good between the mushrooms and the broth continuing to develop. Wow. So these mushrooms, I don't know if you can tell, I'm getting a little bit more resistance as I'm pushing them on the pan. So they've hopefully started to release most of their water out now. And that's why you can see this color beginning to develop. Hopefully, we're almost ready for mirin, because the sooner I get this sauce done, the sooner I can start on the marinade for the ribs. Matter of fact, I'm just going to do it. I think people were talking about how it's kind of wild that I multitask between talking about the topic and cooking and all of that. Well, let's multitask with cooking while we also talk about the topic. How about that? A little challenge for myself. So for the miso sticky ribs, it's really simple. Pretty much just some brown sugar, which I'm going to reserve a little bit of this. I'm pretty sure for a tare, you're supposed to use like a white sugar, but I'm currently really poor, full transparency. So brown sugar is all I have left, and this is actually the last bit of brown sugar that I have in my pantry. So we're really scraping ends with this meal. I think the biggest issue that I have with Patrick Star is that over time, he becomes more and more one note. He used to be included in the plot, his blunders were, and it wasn't so much that he was just being stupid, but it was the fact that other characters, namely SpongeBob, believed that he wasn't stupid, believed that he had some wisdom to offer, even though he really didn't, right? They stopped doing that, and they just started saying, hey, so what if Patrick says something really stupid in this moment? Wouldn't that be like something that's really good to help keep the story, you know, fresh, so that as we're moving along this plot, people can still remember that SpongeBob is a comedy show, that it's meant to be funny. So yeah, I don't know. Patrick just stopped being so integral to the plot, and more so was a diversion from the plot of just like, hey guys, haha, look at him be stupid. Anyways, Patrick's character progression isn't exactly important to today's topic, but kind of is. It's more so just the idea that Flanderization can apply to us in real life. The research question that I had for today was, what happens when we compartmentalize complex people into simple characters? What I mean by that is we oftentimes will, as we get to know someone, we will find little tidbits of information. We will find little things that do work with them, and when those things work, we kind of stick to those things only because they're comfortable, they're known, right? We don't have to worry about looking for some other thing in this person that they may not like, or that may make them not like us so much if we say this thing, or if we're into this thing that they're not into, right? It feeds into those fears. And so today I wanted to talk about this, not so much as a way of saying like, hey, I know everything about Flanderization and here's all that you should know, but I do think that it's something that happens in our lives more often than you would expect. I wanted to kind of talk about the effects of both us, the people who are doing the Flanderizing, and then on the other side, the people who are being Flanderized. What does it do to that relationship? Mushrooms, definitely getting some good color on them. Oh yeah. Part of the reason that I chose ramen today for today's meal is that I think that it is kind of a reflection of human relationships, and that making ramen is a very complex process, right? Our broth over here, it simmers for a whole day, and it has to be replenished over time as water starts to evaporate out and you have things sticking to the pan, right? You don't want anything to burn, so you have to add more water in the same way that we must water our broth to make sure that it's at the right level and in the right environment for all of these flavors to come out, we also have to water our friendships, right? We also have to pour ourselves into our friendships. For tare, it requires balance, and it takes time for it to marinate, right? For this mushroom that's cooking right now, for it to let out all of its umami flavor, right? And then for the mirin to provide a little hit of sweetness, in addition to the sugar that I add. And then finally, for all of those flavors to set into the soy sauce that I add, the main liquid, so you get this wonderful soup of sorts. It's not really a soup, it's a sauce. This wonderful sauce that we put at the bottom of our ramen bowl. It's something that really needs that balance. And so in the same way, it takes time for us to find a balance with other people, right? For us to find an accord with other people. And so we have to maintain a certain balance, a certain rhythm with people over time for our relationship to improve and to grow deeper. Toppings in a ramen bowl, right? It makes each bowl unique. And in the same way, each relationship requires a different prescription. There's no person that requires the exact same thing from you as another person. Our mushrooms are basically just frying now, so I think it's about time to go in with some mirin. I do recognize that there's a decent amount of oil in this pan, so I'm probably going to pay for this by oil popping on me. Yep, there it is. Hurts just a little bit. So we've got our mirin in. Our heat is turned quite low now. It's really interesting to see this mirin. It combines with the oil and the waters and all of these things that have combined in this pot just from frying these mushrooms. It almost gets a sticky, syrupy-like consistency. And now, it hasn't been too long, but I think it has been long enough that the soy sauce can go in. Where is... Oh, there it is. And so to our tare, soy sauce is in. As always, the recipe for everything will be in the description. So I usually don't put the measurements in as I'm cooking if it's your first time here, but all of the specifics to what I cook will be in the description. So fear not. Cool, and a little bit of sugar now. And that's the base of our tare. Quite simple. Pretty much just a salty, slightly sweet, very umami mushroom sauce. And I don't want this sauce to get syrupy, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat off. I'm gonna put it on my smaller eye in hopes that it doesn't cook too quickly or get too hot. I want those flavors to get to know each other in a lower heat environment. So that nothing is in danger of burning and that I don't evaporate too much soy sauce from this sauce. I really just want the flavors that I put in to infuse into the soy sauce. Another quick look at the broth because I can't help myself. It doesn't look like it's changed too much since we last took a look at it. The thing that's awesome about a cartouche is it will kind of pick up all of that scum that you usually get in a broth and sit on the bottom lining of it. So that broth is going to continue to cook down, and it will be a wonderful friend to us in about 2 or 3 hours. To start, I had the idea of replacing the acronym that I'm sure many of you were taught in school of KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. I think instead we should kick. We should keep it complex, kid. I hate it. I hate it when it comes out of my mouth. Healthy relationships require more than one ingredient too, right? As we're talking about our dish for today. All of the memories that provide us with different feelings about a person and all of the traits that we observe in a person make it harder for any single bad trait or experience with them to taint the entire relationship. I did put some garlic into the broth here that we have, but if I were to add 8 more garlic cloves, let's say, would it be terrible? I would argue no, right? It might be a little more garlicky than I would usually prefer out of my Tonkotsu ramen broth, but it would still hold up rather well, right? Because we have pork bones, we have onion, we have ginger, we have these other flavors that can kind of help balance out this addition of garlic. If instead I neglected to put all of those things in, right, and we just had plain water and I threw in 8 garlic cloves in, I don't think it would taste very good, right? At least no one that I know, and I definitely myself do not drink garlic water. There was a study by Kim in 2006 where they developed measures of relationship complexity and relationship concept differentiation and looked at how those concepts related to emotional reactions after recalling negative relationship events. Lower relationship complexity was associated with a stronger negative affective reaction after recalling a negative relationship event. All of this jargon basically combines to say that when someone has a simpler mental picture of the relationship, one bad event may emotionally contaminate more of the relationship, right? In the same way that we pointed to the ramen broth and said that, you know, a bit more garlic may not ruin the broth, right? Even if we do notice it to be a bit more garlicky, it may not ruin it. The same thing happens here. The more complex that a relationship is with someone, the less likely that any bad trait or bad experience with them can ruin the entire relationship or emotionally contaminate your mind. So we have garlic, we have brown sugar. I'm going to go in with miso and get a quick little spoon, scoop of that. I would say this should be about, I don't know, a heaping tablespoon, maybe even 2. Nah, I'd say that's a good heaping tablespoon of miso into our marinade. And lastly, we do need a bit of liquid to introduce all of these flavors together so it's not just a paste. So I'm going to add in some soy sauce. We're just going to get in here all personal with these short ribs and just mix it together, make sure that everything is coated well. And then this marinade will go into the fridge until about 30 minutes before we are ready to serve. And I will throw that into an oven. We'll get this nice and cooked, and those sugars will caramelize on top, and it'll be a great time that is had by all. Wow, it smells amazing. And for good measure, I'm also going to go in with a smidgen of sesame oil. Maybe a bit more than a smidgen. Just out of curiosity, are any of you familiar with this cut of short rib, the flanken cut? I don't know if you can see here, but rather than the English style cut, where it's cut across one bone, and you get this real thick piece of short rib. This is usually used in short rib ragu, if you've ever had that in Italian restaurants. This instead is cut across multiple bones, right? So it's not just long, but if you can see, there's 1 and 2 and 3 bone sections that this piece of meat is cut across. I grew up with these, personally. My mom used to make some short ribs and rice that were, oh, God, to die for. Like, my brother and I would literally be scraping the pan out just to try to get the juice out so we could put it on top of our rice. It was just magical. Wow. Thank you, Mother, for all of the wonderful food that I had growing up. I think it was a big inspiration as to why I still cook today. It's salty, it's umami. Oh, you know what I just realized, me saying umami, that I forgot, I neglected to add to my tare sauce, MSG. What was I thinking? Just a good pinch. A real good pinch of MSG in that sauce will help bring out some more of those umami notes and really concentrate all of those meaty flavors that the mushroom has imparted on the tare. Make sure to cover your meat. It's a very important thing to do as an adult. Okay, this will go into the fridge until 30 minutes before we are ready to cook, or I guess ready to plate our ramen or bowl our ramen, if you will. We'll throw that in the oven for about 6-ish minutes on each side. And then put it under the broiler so that all of those sugars can really caramelize on here, crisp up, and get this almost like brulee effect. I'd like to make at least one more point before we head on to break, and that is compartmentalizing, right? The idea of compartmentalizing people and pushing them into these little boxes. Showers and Kevlin, they thought about how we organize in 2 different ways when it comes to relationships with other people. So there is compartmentalized organization, which means that positive and negative beliefs are sorted into separate categories, right? So the things that we believe to be positive about someone and the things that we believe to be negative about someone, we push them aside, and those are separate things, right? Rather than maintaining the same space in our brain when we think about someone. Next is integrative organization, which means that positive and negative beliefs are mixed within the same category. So if you were to think about it in terms of organizing folders, right, you would have a good folder and a bad folder for compartmentalized organization, and then for integrative organization, you would just have one folder, right? And that is the person. I'm gonna throw in the green onions to the broth because I can, you know? I feel like it's kind of a why not thing. So I'm just going to cut off the roots here. Oh, man, I love the roots. Not of the green onions, but the band, if you're familiar. Any ball knowers who like the roots out there? I hope so. This way that we organize people in our brains matters, where long-term intimacy requires a complete understanding of a person rather than their good side and their bad side. Something that was interesting to me about this study is that shared activities with a partner can shape the way that we organize in our brain. So for example, right, let's say competitiveness. Well, in some activities, right, if you enjoy playing sports or games or whatever with the other person in this relationship, then maybe competitiveness would be inspiring or otherwise welcomed. But in other facets, right, in terms of career, in terms of education, or just other parts of life, right, you may not want someone to compete with you in that way. And so that may be considered a negative trait. When we go to think about someone, it's not really fair to be like, well, these things are good about this person and these things are bad about this person. Now, of course, there's our perspective of, maybe we wish this person wouldn't do this thing. And that's where communication comes along, where if it's something that's not livable to us or something that, we don't deem to be a pleasurable part of the relationship, then maybe it's worth bringing up to that friend, to that partner, and saying that. But all of that is to say that the traits that make up a person aren't really things that we can shove into boxes, right? It really undermines the complexity of a human being. I think it plays into the idea of something being worth more than the sum of its parts, right? People definitely work the same way, that you could take every single piece of me, you could take my sense of humor, and you could take my creativity and my, the way that I carry myself in terms of how I look or in terms of how I speak or all of these things, right? But you couldn't make me again if you tried. All right, guys, welcome back from the ad break. I do apologize for the mid-rolls. Once I get sponsorships and things like that, I plan on shooting some really fun early 2000s style commercials. But until then, you will have to bear with me as I pay my bills. So thank you for bearing with me on that short intermission. That being said, everything looks awesome. This is about 3 hours later. The pork broth has really started to come along. Good God, is it creamy? Camera 2, take a look at that. You guys see how creamy this broth is? It's kind of insane to me that all you have to do is simmer bones long enough and you can get this broth. Whenever I first tried Tonkotsu broth so many years ago, I assumed that there was some sort of cream in it, that it had to be, dairy or some form of cream that was producing such a creamy product. But no, just straight bones, just straight collagen and gelatin and all sorts of meaty good stuff. Crazy. So currently my oven is preheated to 400 degrees. Object number 1 on my list is to get these short ribs in the oven, get them starting to cook. We're going to cook them for about 6 minutes each side, just because the heat is so high in the oven at 400 degrees. Okay, so we're going to go in the oven with our short rib. It is laid out so beautifully for you here. In we go, and that'll be about 6 minutes, 6-ish. And then we'll flip, and then I'll throw it under the broiler so that sugar can get super crispy and awesome and tasty and good. I'm going to do my best to be good and not let this timer go off so that none of us have our ears assaulted by such a thing. So I'm just having that there so I kind of have a mental note of how quickly I need to move. Straining the broth is item number 2. It's kind of unfair to put people into these categories and these folders in our mind of, here's all the good things about this person and here's all the bad things about this person, right? There's many a time, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, basic law of attraction stuff, right? Sometimes someone will do something that you think is very annoying, and then you spend enough time with that person and you begin to grow fond of them, and even the little things that once annoyed you are now an object of attraction or admiration. Another point that I wanted to make was about authenticity in relationships. So there was a study in 2015 by Soler, or Soye maybe. I'm not too sure, but they studied relationship inauthenticity. So a mismatch between what someone thinks or feels and what they actually say or do in a relationship context. Their paper notes that young people may give up emotional needs and desires to avoid conflict or preserve relationships, and that compromised authenticity is linked with poorer mental health outcomes. I think the way that I thought about this is that, we as people, we try to manage stress as best as we can, right? We try to not be uncomfortable as much as we can manage it. As we are all social beings, we all want to be liked, right? We all want to achieve a certain rhythm and a certain accord with people. And so when we find a certain pathway that works, a joke, an activity that you can share with someone, or, some other trait that you guys happen to have in common that you stumble upon, right? When we find that thing, we don't have to worry anymore. Right? We don't have to stress out. We don't have to worry that, we may try a joke with them and it won't land because we know that they think this thing is funny. So let's talk about this thing, this other thing that I already know they enjoy. Well, there is merit to that. We do want to try to maximize the amount of happiness that we enjoy, not only ourselves, but in the company of other people. You can't compromise the complexity of a relationship to achieve that maximum happiness, right? Short-term risks versus a long-term opportunity cost. I really don't want to get rid of these bones. I'm looking at these and I'm like, there's some good meat on these bones. In a bowl it goes, because I can't be bothered to dig out the meat right now, but every little bit counts right now, I'm sure that a lot of you guys are feeling that, what is the word? Economical strain, financial strain. It is definitely tough times these days. When we stick to that pathway, though, that joke, that activity, that trait, what have you, when we stick to that thing that works, and we rely on it to, gosh dang it, I failed. Comment below what my punishment is for letting the timer go. When we rely too much on that pathway, relationships can become scripted. Let's see what I wrote about this. While that script can provide a sense of comfort and safety and predictability, how meaningful is that safety when it's shallow, right? It's kind of like cowering behind a really tiny shield for protection, right? It's like, well, I do like this. I feel safe with these tongs in my hand, right? They're familiar. They feel good in my hand. But if a real threat comes up, as safe and as awesome as it feels to have these in my hands, what is it going to do for me? The same thing can be said about relationships, right? If you only have one joke to share with someone, or, just a small handful, or if you only have one type of experience that you share with someone, how much does that person really mean to you? For example, I have some friends who, we mostly just play video games together. And that doesn't mean that, just because you almost exclusively play video games with someone that your relationship can't be deep, right? But I would argue that my relationship with some of those people is not quite as deep as my friendships with people who maybe I do play video games with them, but I also go out to eat with them. I also spend time talking and just catching up on life and being introspective with them. And we talk about career and we talk about politics and we talk about all of the things going on in our life, right? Those relationships are so much deeper because we have spent so much more time to find other ways that we can relate to each other than just this one instance. While, yes, trying out a new joke, a new activity, or probing for a new thing to have in common with someone opens the possibility for a failure to connect. It's important that we take these risks so that we can develop a fuller understanding of the person that we're seeking a connection with. There was a study in 2023 by Gordon and Diamond. They said that feeling understood can predict relationship quality more strongly than how much a partner actually knows. Right? So even if you know a ton about a certain partner, it is very important that they themselves feel understood. It doesn't matter how you perceive the relationships. This goes back to compartmentalizing. It doesn't matter how you organize that relationship in your brain and how you organize those traits that they carry and the things that you have in common and all of these things, right? It all goes back to the other person. I think that as a partner, really, it's kind of similar to a comedian, right? Where when you tell a joke, the audience is king. If you tell a joke and the audience doesn't laugh, you haven't done your job. So you can do all of these things that make you think you're a good partner or a good friend, right? You can read all of the books, you can do all of the things. But at the end of the day, if someone doesn't feel understood and doesn't feel cared for themselves, then you're not doing your job as the partner, as the friend. Gordon and Diamond said, when people feel known and valued, they may be more likely to give their partner the benefit of the doubt, disclose difficult feelings, and maintain relationship quality through conflict. So even whenever you experience conflicts in a relationship, if someone feels understood, they are more likely to give you a pass because, well, this person knows me, they understand me, so they wouldn't try to hurt me, or they wouldn't, they're not going to immediately say, oh, you know what, this person doesn't care, this person doesn't understand me, away with them, right? Something that I thought about was relationship media. I'm sure you guys have seen the videos where partners will answer questions about each other, right? It's like relationship trivia, and we laugh and we judge the quality of their relationship from this, but I mean, what would you rather have? Would you rather have someone who understands you as a person or have someone who knows a bunch of facts about you? Okay, I'm gonna pour the rest of this broth into our bowl, into the bowl. I'm also gonna go ahead and get some water boiling for our ramen noodles here. They're the thick, bouncy kind. We love a bouncy noodle. I don't know what ramen noodles you guys prefer, but I like them. I like them real thick like this. I can appreciate a thinner noodle, but I mean, personally, I even prefer like udon over ramen noodles. Like the thicker, the better, Don't take that out of context. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, I'm really excited for this ramen. Tonkotsu ramen is something that, I've enjoyed for a very long time, but I've never really approached cooking it myself. I have a certain approach to restaurants in that I don't really care to go to a restaurant if I believe I can do what they do at home. You could say that I'm egotistical for that, but, I like to save my money when I can, and I very much enjoy a restaurant. I very much love being able to enjoy a chef's food, Just whenever there's a chef who's really impressive and it's clear that they care a lot about their craft and what it is that they're putting out of that they're releasing out of their kitchen. Ramen is one of those things that for a long time I've been like, yeah, no, I can't do that. I can't do that, so I'm going to go out to eat. Like I said, this is my first time making ramen, so there's probably going to be some things that I've done wrong. If you haven't already, I'm sure that there are people who are ready to correct me in the comments. Please do so if I have done anything wrong, because while I do love fusion food, I do want to approach food with a certain respect and authenticity. As a Filipino American, I don't want to take a Japanese dish and just completely butcher it and say, hey everyone, this is how you make tonkotsu ramen definitively, whenever that's not the case. So, yeah. There's something to be said about favorites, how we all lean towards certain preferences, like even something as silly as having a favorite bowl. My mom got me this ramen bowl. I think it's literally from Walmart. Yeah, Better Homes and Gardens, there you go. But I love my mom dearly, and so simply because she got it for me, I was like, yeah, this is my ramen bowl forever. And my girlfriend's preferred bowl, I think it's a bunny. I've never actually paid close enough attention to it, but yeah, this little bunny bowl, isn't that adorable? Okay, guys, dinner. As we usually do, before we close out the show, I would like to introduce the segment Good Thing, Bad Thing, where I bring up a good thing and then a bad thing. We'll start with the bad thing. Basketball sucks right now. In what way, Chandler, do you ask? Men. Wow, really big surprise, huh? Two men by the names of Innis Freedom and Royce White decided that it would be a funny joke to come out as transgender women so that they may introduce themselves into this year's WNBA draft. Which is laughable to me, considering that Royce White averaged 0 points per game in his NBA career and is not allowed to see his wife and child because he, hurt them physically. In his freedom, it's also laughable for him, given the fact that he came to America to seek asylum from Turkey. His name previously was Enes Kanter, and he changed it to Enes Freedom after receiving his U.S. citizenship. So it's like you're free to discriminate against trans people now? Like, good for you, man, I guess. Also, in the newest NBA 2K game, 2K27, there will be a female My Player, like My Career mode. And everyone was commenting, basically just upset that women, and really importantly to me, little girls who want to play games and want to, they watch the WNBA and they're really big fans of the sport, they now can play the game and make their own character in the same way that I was able to as a little boy, make, my own characters in sports games. And men are upset about it. Like, oh, I swear to God, if I get dunked on by a woman in this game, I'm quitting. Like, okay, dude, like, just say you hate women, Rant over the good thing, Dungeon Crawler Carl. I know I'm like really, really far behind. I think there's like 9-10 books now. But I read the first one, really good. There's little small things, but for the most part, I have not laughed that loud or hard when reading a book before. Like, there were multiple times that I had to put the book down just to laugh and get it out. I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you are a gamer in any way, this book will definitely resonate with you and likely be a funny one for you to read. And just to wrap up the episode, we talked about Flanderization, about its origins and Ned Flanders, and an example in Patrick Starr. We talked about how it can apply to our relationships, right? It starts with organization, right? How we organize our thoughts about someone in our brain, whether we view them as a complex individual who is more than the sum of their parts, or if we compartmentalize and say, well, here's the good things and here's the bad things about them. We talked about how that can get worse when the relationship lacks complexity. If you have a very shallow relationship with someone, it doesn't take much to cause an emotional strain on that relationship. We also talked about how it becomes behavior when people keep following the same script, right? Whenever there's a certain pathway that seems to be easiest or most comfortable with a person, when we only explore that pathway, it dulls the relationship, and it makes it a lot easier for emotional strain, once again, to work its way into the relationship. And lastly is the alternative to Flanderization in terms of how we handle our relationships and not putting people into this box of this one trait or this one type of thing that we see in them, is a felt understanding, appreciation, and responsiveness. Our jobs as friends, as partners, as people is to make other people feel understood, not just that we know about them and we know things about them, but we know them, what really makes them tick at their core. Once again, the growth of the show has been absolutely insane. Like, I can't believe that there's over 17,000 of you guys now. Thank you so much for watching, seriously. I know that I've put a lot of work into the show over almost a year now, but the fact that it's real and you guys are here and you care about the topics and you enjoy the food and all of that, I really cannot say it enough how much I appreciate that you were all here. So you're always welcome, and I hope to see you in the next one.
got me